Hello, everybody, and welcome to the very first episode of Islands Uncovered, a travel advisor's guide to sandals, beaches, and their island homes. My name is Megan, and I am the owner of Dare to Dream Travel. I exclusively sell sandals and beaches resorts, which are luxury resorts located all across the Caribbean. All inclusive sandals is the adults only, beaches is their family brand. So I've started this podcast because I had a YouTube channel that I had been posting videos to with tips and tricks and wedding information and all sorts of stuff about the resorts, was going fairly well. But after completing another podcast with a friend of mine, I decided that this might be a better outlet to relay that information. And my goal here is a couple different things. So as a travel advisor, sometimes we get a bad rap. There's a lot of people who goes to these resorts and they really don't want to use a travel advisor. So maybe through this podcast, I can convince some people that we're not all bad, and there's many different reasons and ways that we can help you out. But besides that, just really spreading my love for the Caribbean, educating people on why I think that these resorts are a great choice when choosing, an adults only vacation or family travel. And it can be overwhelming booking these vacations. And so offering some insight on how to do that. And then beyond that, I really wanted to expand a bit more about the islands that these resorts live on. And I think that there's a lot of people who travel to these all-inclusive resorts and, stay on the property for the majority of the time, which there's nothing wrong with that. I do that too. They're fantastic. You really don't want to leave after you get there. But doing that, there's so much more to the islands, and I think that there's a lot more to learn. I think that we as people have a lot more to learn about other cultures and countries. And so, how my vision for this podcast is really simple. So, the beginning of each episode, I'm going to devote a little bit of time to talking about resort updates, travel tips, what's going on the properties, maybe, tips about weddings, or just really focused on the resorts themselves, the room categories, deals, how to book, those sorts of things. And then the second part of each episode, I'm going to dive into something a little bit different, which I don't think is really offered yet. And I'm excited to do it. So these resorts are all offered all throughout the Caribbean on various different islands in different countries. And there's so much to learn, as I mentioned. So I'm going to have the second part of the episode really dive deeper into different things about the island's history or food or culture or maybe a person like we're going to do today, so that when you go and you travel to these places, it might be fun to listen to this and hear some episodes about the certain place that you're going to, even if you're not going to go off resort and see some of these things. Learning about the islands and their history, I think is really fun, regardless of how you travel or what you do once you get there. Just learning a little bit something more beyond this, just what happens at the resort, I think is good for everybody. So I'm hoping that, you'll find this not only helpful when booking, but also enjoyable to listen to these stories. So before I get into it today, I do want to mention that this is not sponsored or affiliated or endorsed by Sandals or Beaches in any way. I have a small business, my travel agency. I sell exclusively Sandals and Beaches properties, so I'm very knowledgeable about these properties. However, I do not work for Sandals and Beaches. So these are my own personal opinions. You're going to get a travel advisor's take on a lot of sales and promos and bookings. And again, these are not the opinions of Sandals or Beaches. These are mine as a travel advisor who travels. I was down in the Caribbean, I think at the end of 2025, if I tally up my days, I think I will have been down there 30 days. And, some of those are paid trips. Some of those are work trips. But regardless, I do take my job seriously in getting to know these resorts. And so if you have any questions about booking or you're interested in travel, I encourage you to reach out to me. I'm always happy to answer questions. travel advisors, our services are always free. So, I'll probably do a whole thing down the road here about, the benefits of using a travel advisor. But the cost for one is already, factored into those prices you are seeing online. So it's not going to charge you any more to reach out to a trusted travel advisor, me or somebody else, to help you get that trip booked. And I guarantee you there are benefits to using somebody. So that is my pitch for my little business. And yeah, so I guess we'll get started with this first episode. So, like I said, this first part is going to be structured about the resorts and updates. And, I've had this idea going and I've taped this a while back, but I'm adjusting this first part simply because of Hurricane Melissa and everything that has happened in Jamaica over the last couple of days. So, I wanted to give a little update from a travel advisor perspective. Again, as I mentioned, I don't work for Sandals or Beaches, so I'm not, on the inside. But here's what I know. So I have multiple clients traveling, to Jamaica. I don't have anybody there. But what I encourage everybody to do is I know there's a lot of things online right now. And social media is a blessing and a curse, right? We can check on people who we might know who are there through social media, but also there are a lot of things being posted online that I've seen, at least, that critical thinking is important. I've seen a lot of videos that simply aren't real. And so when you are looking at videos online to see what is happening, I encourage you to take a good look at the videos. Where's the video coming from? Make sure you look if somebody posted that it's AI. It's probably not real. Social media right now, it's all about how many clicks you can get. And so things can sometimes be sensationalized to get those clicks. So just when you're looking at videos, social media, make sure that there's some critical thinking involved in if what you're seeing is sensationalized a bit. I also encourage people, if you're on the blogs, if you're commenting on things, if you're not there, everything is just a guess, right? I've seen a lot of stuff online that says the resorts will open, in 8 weeks, the resorts will open in 6 weeks, the resorts, nobody knows except the people actually in charge of the resorts. I don't know. We haven't been told yet. And so just like anything else, you should really wait and hear it from the people who are actually making those decisions, and don't listen to just any random person on Facebook or social media. Everybody is entitled to their opinion, but remember that an opinion is very different than fact. And so just keep that in mind when you are looking through all of this stuff. And so what I do know for a fact is that what they are currently offering to do is reschedule anybody with with travel to Jamaica between now and November 13th. Those trips are being prioritized. You can call your travel advisor if you've used one, and they can do this for you. It's certainly coming in handy right now. I've been on hold for about 2 hours trying to get through. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. There's just a lot of people trying to call in. I'm not mad about it. It is what it is. So you're going to have to call in, and they're going to give you some options for switching your trip. And so I don't know if it's the same for all of the resorts, but for example, I have a family going to Beaches Negril. They're leaving next week. So they said that if they want to move their trip anytime within the next 60 days, they can move it to Turks. Then they will switch them to a comparable room category at the same rate for the same amount of time. Okay. So we can try to switch within that time period. My travelers had travel protection, so they can always just cancel their trip, and the vouchers will come back to them in the amount of travel that they can use anytime within the next year. Or they can reschedule anytime, they can reschedule for any time at any resort, but you have to pay the difference in pricing if it's beyond that 60 days. So those are some examples of what is being offered. I really strongly encourage you to call in if you have travel during the next couple weeks to look to get that rescheduled. Now, if you are farther out, it's considered an optional reschedule at this point, okay? So you are going to have to look to see if you have travel protection. With that being said, they are doing their best to evaluate the state of all of the resorts across Jamaica. It doesn't happen instantaneously. It's going to take time. And so if you have a trip a little bit further out, perhaps consider waiting until early next week to call back once they have a better idea of the extent of the damage, of the roads, of the airport. All those things are going to have to come into play. And I'll wrap up with please give everybody some grace when you're calling. I'm sure the call center is been slammed all day. And I'm sure they're working long hours and they're doing their very best to get everybody accommodated. So having some patience, kindness, and a little grace when you're calling in, I'm sure it goes a long way. Okay, so besides Hurricane Melissa, if you are looking at other properties, there are many other great properties that are still open and available for booking. The sales going on right now are the Stay More, Save More sales. So that is for the booking window. It goes through November 3rd. So only a few more days for that. And then you can travel through the end of 2027 on this deal with blackout dates. There's always going to be blackout dates with these sales. So if you are dead set on traveling over Christmas, just know that any sale that is ever going on is probably not going to apply anytime between Christmas and New Year's. It's supply and demand, people. But the Stay More, Save More sale, you can get up to $1,000 instant credit. Depends on how long you stay. It depends on where you stay. Now, this is for sandals. And then with 7+ nights, you get $175 resort credit and a free night. So that is all with the sandals properties. And then with beaches, it's up to a $400 credit. So a little bit less of a credit. And if you book the 7 nights, you get $175 spa credit. Same thing applies for the booking window through November 3rd, travel window through December 25th, 2027. There are more blackout dates for beaches simply because of when the kids are not in school. Those are high times. So they're blacking out Thanksgiving. They're blacking out around spring break. I'm seeing for 2026, they're actually blacking out February 14th through the 20th. So that must be popular as well. And then some same time frames for 2027. So it's helpful to have a travel advisor. They can kind of guide you through this, make sure that you are getting these deals. Some deals you have to register for after you book them. You don't automatically get the spa credit, the resort credit. You need to register things. So reaching out to a trusted travel advisor is super important to make sure that you are getting all the great deals. These compare also with 777. I always try to stack as many deals on top of each other as possible. I'll do an episode where I talk through stacking of the deals and what can go on what. So beyond that sale, which I anticipate they probably will change after November 3rd because it has already been extended once. I don't know for sure on that. That's just my guess. Besides that and the 777s, that is all of the advertised sales going on right now. And I will update you next week if they decide to extend this sale or if they offer another sale. And then next week, I will, of course, update as well on any Hurricane Melissa updates that I have, how far out they're pushing the bookings, cancellations, anything I know, I will update you. Okay, so now we're going to move past the resort information into what is going to be the story part of the podcast for today. And I had this one already in my queue, but I also decided that because of Hurricane Melissa and the huge impacts on Jamaica, every week this month, I'm going to focus on a story about Jamaica. It won't always be people like it is today. I have a few different ideas, but November is going to be devoted to the island of Jamaica, its country, and I hope that you learn a little bit more about it beyond the resorts and it inspires you to book a trip. So that is my goal with the focus on Jamaica for the month of November. Oh, and I am actually going to, hopefully, fingers crossed, I'm hoping to go to Jamaica for a couple nights on November 30th. So I will be there for 3 nights at Sandals Duns River. I will talk about that on the podcast, and I'll probably share videos and images, live feed on my social media. So I encourage you to follow me on Instagram. It's DTD Travel WI. That's the same as Facebook, but Instagram is where I try to post the most stuff. stuff. So I'll talk about it on the podcast, but obviously this is just audio. If you want to see real-time photos, videos of how the resort looks once I go down there, again, I'll be at Sandals Duns River. I might try to pop over to Ochi as well, since it is very close. Fingers crossed the airport opens up, fingers crossed the resort opens up, and I will be able to go down there and tell everybody at the end of November how everything's doing. So stay tuned for that. Okay, now we're going to get into this story. I'm really excited for this one. So today we're going to talk about a woman named Norma Shirley. Norma is from Jamaica, and she lived her life doing something that I love to do as well, which is cook. So I thought this would be a good tie-in because when I go to Sandals or beaches, I certainly eat a lot of food. And I'm sure everybody listening to this does as well. Sandals and beaches, they do pride themselves on trying to incorporate Caribbean food, not just Americanized food. So I thought I would do an episode to start us off with a wonderful female chef who came out of Jamaica. So here's the story of Norma Shirley. So, Norma was born on August 13th in 1938 in St. James Parish of Jamaica, which it was up in the hills a little bit, but it's St. James is where Montego Bay is located. So, when you fly into Jamaica, you fly many times into Montego Bay. That's the main airport. And so she was in this area, but outside the city. Her parents were Lucy Gibson and Verley Smith. And she grew up always experiencing a lot of different diverse foods. It said in the research that I was doing that her whole family married a lot of different people from different cultures, including Chinese and East Indian and Italian. And so all of these flavors and foods, she grew up with them. And so I think many times that helps to inspire chefs as they're growing up to being able to experience all these foods. So when she was 9, her parents actually left and went to the United States, and she stayed in Jamaica with her family. She spent her summers with her maternal grandparents who had a banana plantation, and her family was fairly well off, but she spent a lot of time out in the plantation having lunch with the workers, and again got to experience a lot of diverse foods dining with them. I think it said that her grandparents didn't really like that she was doing that, but she enjoyed, that was how she enjoyed spending her day. So then she went to attend St. Hugh's boarding school in Kingston. So Kingston is the capital of Jamaica. There are no Sandals or beaches resorts there, but that is the capital. It's on the south side of Jamaica. It got hit really bad by the hurricane. So while she was little, she really dreamt of leaving Jamaica. She wanted to be an architect or an interior designer. And eventually she took the leap and after she graduated high school, she went to Scotland's Southern General Hospital to study nursing. And I think she might have went to Scotland because it said that her maternal grandfather, who she was staying with in the summer, he was Scottish. So maybe there was a connection there, but she did end up going to Scotland. She worked as a helicopter rescue nurse after she graduated. And, she made a huge difference in Scotland, but she really started to miss the food from home while she was there. She said the food was a lot heavier and she missed more of the fresh produce and the lighter food from home. I can appreciate that. I studied in France for a short bit and I missed many different things, like tacos mainly. I don't know. They never had like ground beef Americanized tacos. There was like none of that. And I really missed the tacos. So eventually she ended up moving back to Jamaica in the 1960s, and she worked as a surgical nurse at the University of the West Indies Medical School in Kingston. So she went back to Kingston. She was working at a nurse, and that's where she met her future husband, Michael Shirley, who was also in school training to be a gynecologist. So Michael was actually born in England. So they got married then in 1965 and returned to Europe for a huge honeymoon all across Europe. And that's where Norma then fell in love with French cuisine. So she was really diving into the food culture over in Europe. She credited her husband to exposing her to all of these different types of food, but what she really loved was the French cuisine. So what she did, like many of us do when we think of French cooking, is she bought a stack of Julia Child cookbooks and practiced the recipes. And she missed her food from home. So they said that she redesigned them to use Jamaican ingredients and add her own touch, which, if you love to cook, you know how important it is to be able to look at a recipe and tweak it so that it fits you or your family's own personal preferences. Baking is one thing where you have to follow a recipe exactly or it's not going to work. But cooking, you don't need to follow exactly to a T. I try to teach my son this, who loves to cook. And this is what Norma was doing. She was using her Jamaican ingredients and flavors to make the recipes her own. So she continued to work as a midwife while they were living in Sweden in 1969. And then she gave birth to her son. I hope I'm pronouncing this right. I'm probably not, but it's Delius. Delius. It was her only child, but due to Michael's work, they moved frequently. And when Delius was a year old, they moved to New York City, to the Upper West Side of Manhattan. She worked as a nurse there, but she still loved to cook. So she threw these lavish dinner parties, and it said she packed Delius's lunchbox with brie sandwiches and foie gras. Now, I don't know how my kids would react to that, but I would like it if somebody was making brie sandwiches every day. But she was just disgusted by like cafeteria food and thought that you could really do better with nice ingredients. So 1976 comes around. Michael moves the family again to Berkshire Medical Center in Massachusetts. They had a large house. She had a huge garden, a huge electric stove for cooking, all the stuff. But winters in Massachusetts were cold, and she didn't really have a lot of friends because she couldn't relate to all of the housewives who didn't really work. And Norma liked to work. She was still a nurse. She was going back and forth to New York still. And so she just really couldn't relate to people. And I think that many people can understand that feeling if you've ever moved before. You just don't feel connected to the space. But she was having a hard time. She was going back and forth to the city. After a year of that long commute, she quit her job because she had a kid at home, and it was really hard and stressful. But she needed something to do. She wasn't one of those people who could just stay home. She felt like she was bored if she didn't have something to do. So one night in 1977, she was at a concert on a Friday night, and they were serving cafeteria style food. They described it as at this outdoor concert. You could go up and, you could get some of this cafeteria style food. And so she thought of an idea, which I think is genius, to make gourmet picnic baskets to order. And so people would place an order with her, and she would put together a basket with a wine glass and metal cutlery and plates of home cooked food. And it said her first baskets, listen, this is amazing, contained chicken breasts stuffed with prosciutto and mushrooms, French bread with caviar, a tomato salad, and chocolate mousse, which she sold for $5. I know it was 1977, but still, it seems like she was underselling herself. Norma, come on. There was a contingency. People had to return the baskets and the glassware and the cutlery. And it really it took off. And then she started offering a few things with her Jamaican influence, including carrot leek and red bean soup, chicken spiced with Jamaican pick-a-pepper sauce. So, she was trying to give people a little taste of Jamaica, starting with these baskets. And I saw the pick-a-pepper sauce, and again, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. I am not Jamaican. I think I was down there 4 times. Maybe I need to learn how to pronounce some of these things a little bit better, so I apologize. But pick-a-pepper sauce, I saw it and I was like, oh my gosh, I've had that. They have that at some of the Sandals resorts with the chicken. It just depends on where you are. So pick-a-pepper sauce is a Jamaican condiment. It's described as sweet, sour, and mildly spicy. So if you see it, it's not going to be overwhelmingly spicy. It's made of cane vinegar, tomatoes, onion, sugar, and a blend of spices like ginger, peppers, cloves. And it says it's aged in oak barrels. It says it's technically a hot sauce, but the heat level is very mild. So if you see pick-a-pepper sauce in Jamaica, I know you think Jamaica spicy sauces, don't be afraid of it. It's mild. You're going to be okay. Give it a try. Norma was using it on her chicken for a wide variety of things, and people loved it. Okay, so she's doing the baskets for a while. Then the next year, there was this Italian actor named Terrence Hill, and he was one of Norma's neighbors. Remember, they were pretty well off, so they've got actors for neighbors. And he opened a restaurant in the neighborhood and loved Norma's cooking so much that he asked her to be the restaurant's chef and manager. And of course, she said yes. And the restaurant was reservation only, so kind of fancy. And Norma called the food New England food with Jamaican flair. I like that. And so she served her style of food. The only coffee she served was Jamaica Blue Mountain coffee. Tell you guys, get down to Jamaica, try some of the Jamaica Blue Mountain coffee. I'm really hoping that the coffee plantations in Jamaica did not get terribly destroyed. Waiting to hear how that is going to be. But coffee is a huge thing that they export. It's fantastic. My husband craves it when we're not down there. She also served things like curried shrimp on toast and Jamaican meat patties. Jamaican meat patties, people. Also something you can get at Sandals and Beaches. My son loves them. I believe they have them at the resorts, and they have beef, chicken, or vegetarian. I think that in this next month, I'm going to do a whole, second part of one of my podcasts about meat patties, Jamaican meat patties. They are phenomenal. If you get them down there with the really flaky crust, I love them. So you can get them on the resorts. I've had them in the airport before. Also delicious. I keep telling my husband I need to leave room in my suitcase so I can buy a box in the airport and bring it back in my carry-on. Maybe that will happen at the end of this next month. So if anybody's listening to this from Jamaica, please, if you could make a comment about where the best Jamaican meat patties are in Jamaica, I would love to tell people about that when I do my episode. So hit me up. Okay. So Norma's cooking in a restaurant, and the food attracted so much attention. She had write-ups in both Essence magazine and Gentleman's Quarterly, GQ, people. Later in 1980, she received a 3-star review from the Boston Globe, which was high praise. However, the demands of the cooking kind of took a toll on her marriage. There's not much said about it. I'm not going to get into details of anybody's personal life that I do not know. What I am reading, it just said that her work schedule, it took a toll on her marriage. And in 1981, she got divorced from her husband, Michael. And she really wanted to return to Jamaica. But she first, she had her son. So she wanted to move back into New York and try to open her own restaurant. So she took her son. They moved to a little 1-bedroom apartment. I think it said it was on 68th Street and Broadway. And she stayed there for a bit. She helped a friend of hers with a restaurant for a bit, but she just unfortunately wasn't able to find any investors to open her own restaurant in New York. And so that fell through. So that was a very sad time in her life for her. She had this dream, and it said she went through a bit of depression. And then Vogue called. Vogue magazine called. And they said that they were doing a shoot with Brooke Shields and needed a catered lunch for 8 at the World Trade Center. And Norma said she would do it. And the lunch went so well that they brought her on as a consultant to prepare meals for photo shoots each day. She'd bring food in every morning at 6 a.m. to the Condé Nast building. And then it would sit out during the day for all the different stars who would come in for the magazine shoots. And it said that she catered to Christy Brinkley and Raquel Welch, and eventually transitioned into doing food styling for Gourmet magazine as well. So she was living this New York City high profile life. But after 5 years, and her son was about to head to college, and she was thinking I don't know what I'm really going to do. And my son is gone. Norma finally decided that was the time to head back to Jamaica. So in 1986, Caribbean cuisine at that time in New York City was receiving a huge amount of interest. And A New York City Times article published in April of 1986 stated that the food in the Caribbean has become the hottest eating ticket in New York. But right when Norma was heading back to the Caribbean is when the cuisine was really starting to pick up and become more recognized in the city. So Norma went back. She went back to Kingston and she opened her first restaurant called Norma's on Belmont Road. Her food's a little more high end. So it said that the Jamaican people, they didn't really understand her cooking right away and they called it Nouvelle Jamaican. However, she got in there. They got it. And by 1992, she opened her second restaurant called Norma at the Wharf House in the town of Reading, which is just west of Montego Bay. And then Delius even came back to Jamaica to help his mom. So he got a finance degree and then decided he was going to come back to help his mom. So they worked together. And by 1992, Vogue magazine came back and the States referred to her as the Julia Child of Jamaica. So Norma was very well known for her cooking. Unfortunately, Norma never published any cookbooks of her own, but her recipes have appeared in various American cookbooks, such as her jerk pork ribs, which you can find in Sheila Lukins' All Around the World cookbook, published in 1994, and her shrimp Jamaica recipe and Barbara Witt's Great Feasts Without Fuss in 1995. And I will link those in the show notes too if anybody is interested in those cookbooks. You can maybe find them at a local library. By the 1990s, Norma's food was mentioned in Gourmet Magazine, Food and Wine, and Bon Appetit. And by 1994, she lent her name to Norma's on the Beach in Miami, where Delius operated that restaurant with his partner. And Norma's involvement in that restaurant was minimal, but she said she lent her name to her son and his partner. And obviously, the food there did have an influence from her, but she was still back in Jamaica. And then in September of 1995, the James Beard Foundation asked if Norma would host its first Jamaican meal, and she made jerk chicken, poached snapper, and served red stripe beer, and of course, the Jamaican Blue Mountain coffee. There's a lot of snapper on the menus in the Caribbean. I encourage you to try it at the Sandals resorts. Jerk chicken, hit up the Jerk Shack, Jerk Truck. It is my son's favorite. It's definitely great for a snack or any time of the day. So overall, Norma believed that even though Jamaican food didn't look as polished as some other cuisines, the flavors and the value were there. And she wanted her Jamaican country to be so proud of its cuisine and see that it could hold its own with the rest of the world. And I really think she accomplished that. I mean, she opened these restaurants. She had a fantastic career and was recognized worldwide in these magazines. Norma also went on to film 3 episodes of Great Chefs of the World on the Discovery Channel circa 1998, along with 1 episode of Great Chefs of the Caribbean. And she opened more restaurants in Jamaica, including Norma's on the Terrace in Kingston, and which was on Condé Nast's hot list in 2000, and Norma's at the Marina in Port Antonio, and Norma's on the beach in Negril. So she was all over the place. I tried to look up to see if any of these places are still open. I didn't see that they were. If anybody is listening again from Jamaica and has any knowledge about these restaurants or what they've turned into, or if anybody is still using any of Norma's recipes, I would love for you to reach out, shoot me an email, let me know. I just would be so interested in that. And I would be happy to post information about those restaurants on my feed. So Norma cooked less often as she, got a little older, but she kept her outlook very grounded. And in 2003, she told the Jamaican newspaper, The Gleaner, that I am just a quiet person who enjoys cooking, and I would love to give Jamaican people a little more understanding of what cooking can do for them. Norma died of pneumonia on November 1st, 2010, at the age of 72 after opening her final restaurant, The Grog Shop in Kingston. So Norma, she really wanted to show the world what Caribbean cooking can do. And I think she's right. It's not flashy, but it tastes really good. And so I encourage you that when you are at the resorts, these are all-inclusive resorts. So remember, you can try things that maybe you wouldn't normally try. If there's things on the menu that are local, I always try to try the local foods that have the local ingredients. They may not be cooked exactly the same way they would if you were off resort. I understand that. They're trying to make them, likable for a majority of people, or cooking for hundreds and thousands of people. But give it a try. Different fruits on the buffet, different dishes. If you don't like it, you can just order something else. But this is a great example of somebody who really pushed people to try things that maybe they would never have had the opportunity to try before. And while I wasn't able to find if any of Norma's restaurants were still operating, I really hope that there are people out there in Jamaica, I'm sure there are, still using her recipes. And I know I'm going to try to find some of these cookbooks that have her recipes and give them a try. If I'm able to find one that I had listed here, I'll post a picture because I love to cook. So I will, I'll do my best to try to make one of these and post it on my Instagram feed. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed that little story about Norma and her life and Jamaica. As I mentioned, the month of November is going to be devoted to the country of Jamaica. We'll talk about different things, and I will continue to keep you updated about the resorts and Hurricane Melissa and their impacts, and any information that I have, I will share it for you. And then once the storm has passed, we will move on to other islands as well. So that is the goal. We'll touch on all the islands all over the Caribbean, all the different resorts. And I hope that everybody can find something that they like from this podcast and inspire you to travel to these resorts, to these islands, and learn a little bit more about them while you are there. Thank you so much. Safe travels. Research for today's show was done with the book Tastemakers: 7 Immigrant Women Who Revolutionized Food in America by Mayukh. Thank you so much for listening today to Islands Uncovered. If you enjoyed this and want to keep track of future episodes where we talk about Sandals and Beaches resorts, as well as all of the amazing things that you can find on the islands, their history, and their people, please follow us, like our page, subscribe to our social media. If you have questions about booking a Sandals or Beaches vacation, remember my services with Dare to Dream Travel are always completely free of charge to you, and I would love to assist in booking your next vacation, honeymoon, or destination wedding. All of my contact information can be found in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening. Bye-bye.